Hello and welcome back to SpyHards podcast. I'm Agent Scott.
And I'm Cam the Provocateur.
And we're here continuing our celebration of 2012's James Bond film Skyfall. Cam, who do we have with us?
Yes, we are talking to second unit director Alexander Witt, who worked not only on Skyfall, but also Casino Royale, Spectre, and a little film called No Time to Die, plus many other spy films and major blockbusters that you no doubt have seen in the theater.
Absolutely. This guy's filmography is exceedingly extensive, and you'd be surprised the films that he's been involved with. So without further ado, Cam, roll it. And joining us now on the show, we've been talking about James Bond this week, and this man knows his Bond. It is Mr. Alexander Witt. Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me.
Oh, our pleasure.
It's an absolute pleasure. Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here. I mean, your credits speak for themselves when it comes to spy movies, let alone James Bond. I mean, you've been involved in everything from The Hunt for Red October, Bourne Identity, XXX, 4 James Bond films. I mean, it's you are the man to talk to when it comes to spy movies.
Well, kind of. There are a few others, but yeah, somehow I got involved in it, and thank you to Jan de Bond, who really started me in second unit and action mainly.
Well, that sort of takes me to my first real question. What made you want to get involved in filmmaking, and what sort of helped get your start?
Well, it's a long story. I mean, I really wanted to be an actor, and that was my first thought about getting into the movie. And so when I went to Germany and then I went to England, I still wanted to be an actor, but then that didn't work as good as I thought. So, and in '73, when I went to Germany, I started with Ariflex, and photography was always something that I was interested in too. And that's how I got to start as a camera assistant, then an operator, and then a DP, and I started directing commercials. And I met Jan de Bond in '83 on Cujo, 83 on Cujo, and he really helped me a lot in my career and gave me also the opportunity to start in second unit on Speed. And that's how I mean, the movie did very well, so that's when the calls started coming in to do second unit.
And you worked with a lot of famous people, famous directors leading up to, '94 working on Speed. I see John McTiernan, Steven Spielberg, a lot of big names. But I am just curious, whether it was Jan de Bont or someone else, like what were some of the really important lessons you learned along the way that have helped kind of form your career?
Well, I mean, with every director of photography, you learn something. I mean, everybody has his own style, and especially on second unit, you have to keep the style that every DP in each movie is doing. So you learn a lot with every one of them. And then when you do your own movies, you have quite a good idea of what the movie or what the film needs, what kind of photography it needs. I mean, a comedy is different than drama, and action is different than comedy and all that. So you learn from each one of them. And also from the directors, you learn the way they direct actors, and what goes well with, again, what goes well with comedy and action and things like that. So I think with everyone you learn something.
And one question I've always been really curious about is that a lot of these people, you've worked with and made films with, very visually distinct filmmakers, whether directors of photography or directors. And I've always been really interested to know, when you're working the second unit, keeping visual continuity so the film looks entirely of one vision, even though you have two separate departments.
Yeah, I mean, that's you talk with the director, and you talk to the director of photography right a couple of months before you start shooting, and you learn also what kind of photography he wants to do, and the way the director sees his film. and so you have a constant relation with them before you start shooting, and then you have to match whatever they do in the directing. I mean, some directors want wide shots and long shots and not so many cuts. Others want as many cuts or as many shots you can give them for, so they can have a they can choose at the end in the editing. And it's the same with the DP. So you have a long relation with them before you start shooting.
Right. And are they looking at dailies every day of what you've shot?
Yeah, they do. And sometimes they come up and they say, here, yeah, I'll make the shots a little longer, or I mean, they have their own opinion. And of course, the second unit, it's not always easy, because after you see something, you can always make it better. So sometimes it's really tough with some directors and DOPs to really make them happy. I mean, Ridley Scott was, for me, was one of the best teachers that I've had, from the directing point, from the designing the shots. He was probably the best teacher I had. And Jan de Bont and other DPs have been great teachers in a way that, especially Jan de Bont, to show me how to light quick and make it still look good. Something that I'm trying on this movie, but it's a little different when you do TV and when you do movies, because you don't really have the time. They don't give you the time to make a good job in that sense.
And do you tend to find, when you're working with the director and you're coming up with a vision for the film, do you find you get much say in what you want to do with it, or do you find a lot of the time it's quite prescriptive and you have to shoot to that director's vision?
Well, I try to do as much as they want, and or the way they see the film, and then I give them ideas. And also when I'm shooting, I have my own ideas, but I still have to shoot the way they see the film. And I can give them ideas and shoot with other cameras and shoot other angles and things like that, so they can, and they like that. I mean, they know that sometimes a shot they don't know because of the lighting is different, or when you scout the locations, it was in the summer and then you're shooting in the winter and the light is totally different, and it's the same with the DPs. The DPs, of course, understand a little better the situation, but sometimes the directors say, well, I wanted to shoot this way, but 2 months later or 3 months later the light was really bad, so you try and make it look good and you change it, but they don't have the idea that okay, it looks great, and they still have the idea of what they saw 2-3 months ago when you scouted it.
And yeah, I mentioned off the top we're talking about James Bond this week, and we're going to jump a little bit over your filmography when we're talking about films, but I think we'll use James Bond as a launching off point, because in 2006 you joined the James Bond team as the second unit director for Casino Royale, still I think probably the best James Bond film ever made. How did you get connected with the project?
Well, it was one of those lucky moments that a second unit director who was asked to do Casino Royale, he wasn't available. I mean, this is a story that I heard.
Sure,
right?
Sure.
And he mentioned my name, and so they called me. And I went to England and had an interview. And a week or 2 weeks later, I got the call saying, okay, you're hired, and can you start then and then? And that's how I heard the story. Yeah, I mean, I had done a few pictures before, Black Hawk Down, Gladiator, big movies. And so I guess my resume in that sense was pretty good, showing my job.
And had you sort of, I'm sure you'd had knowledge of the Bond films, but had you been a fan of them before that?
Well, I grew up with them. In '62, I saw my first Bond when I was, or '64 when I was 12 or whatever it was. I can't remember my age anymore, but it's yeah. But I grew up with them, pretty much, all of them.
And one of the really interesting things about Casino Royale is the way it kind of rebooted the franchise, but also brought in real visual flourish to it, really kind of took a different approach to James Bond. I'm just curious, when you're working on that film, kind of the communication going back and forth between you, Martin Campbell, Phil Mayhew, about designing this new visual style of James Bond.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, that's something you start before the shooting. And when you're scouting and talking to Martin and Phil, you start getting also a sense of what they like and how they want to shoot and all that. So that's it all starts when you're doing the prep and the location scouts. So it's and so you have a pretty good idea when you start shooting. And I mean, for myself, I feel like I'm an extension, or I have to be an extension of their work. So I can't go and see, well, they like it backlit. No, I like it front lit, so I do it front lit and things like that. So you really have to have a good understanding of what kind of work they're doing and how they want it.
And I would love to know just, some kind of behind the scenes on creating the parkour sequence and working with Sebastian Foucan and realizing that just unbelievable action sequence.
Well, I mean, he was a big part of the ideas that we had. Sometimes a couple of weeks, after a few weeks, he kind of we had to come up with our own ideas because they only see it one way, and sometimes it's not very cinematic. So we had to change some of the scenes, but he did a great job. And also, it's very important that the stunt department in a movie, I mean, they come up with ideas, and Martin Campbell came up with ideas sometimes. So it's a collaboration of all those 3 or 4 groups of people. And then we try to do the best we can.
There's a nice bit of synergy here because we've had Sebastian on the show, we've had Gary Powell on the show, and now we've had you on the show. It's like the whole team's come together on the show, which I quite like. But speaking of Casino Royale, before we maybe move on to some of the other Bond films, apart from perhaps the parkour, but you could shout that one out. What was sort of the favorite scene of the ones that you worked on, the one you look back on most fondly in Casino?
In Casino, well, I think it was that one. I mean, that was the biggest scene we did, and it was fun. And also we had Daniel Craig with us. And at the beginning, he was a little unsure how to do some of the stuff, but slowly he got the grip on it, and he started liking coming to second unit because it's a little more easygoing, and you don't have to remember all the lines and things like that. So I think he had a very good time coming up with us.
And that's something interesting to dig into for a second, because you've watched his career blossom, really. You've seen him from his birth as Bond to his, spoilers, death as
Right.
James Bond. How has it been working with Daniel throughout the 4 films you've done with him?
Well, I had a very good relation with him. I mean, like I said at the beginning, he was a little worried about, okay, what am I doing here? And I think before, I don't think if he's done anything in that sense before. So, but slowly he got the confidence to do a lot of the stunts himself. And I think that's important, and that's why other actors, when they do their stunts, I think it looks better. It looks more realistic because you don't cut into a close-up and things like that. And I think that helps a lot to the acting. Yeah, I mean, at the end, I think he had a couple of accidents and one he broke, or didn't break, but he he twisted his ankle on Spectre or Skyfall, I think it was, and also on No Time to Die, he also had a problem with his ankle. So after those incidents, they start to get a little more careful and ask the stunt guys to do more of the job.
I would just love to know, when you were shooting the parkour sequence, you had no way of knowing at the time that it would become kind of one of the big legendary Bond action sequences and really loom over all the movies Daniel Craig did. People would constantly call back to that parkour sequence. Did it feel at all special when you were shooting it? Because you'd shot a lot of action. Did it stand out at all at the time?
Well, I think it did, because first of all, of the height we were doing it, and parkour was kind of just starting to become big in the world. So it was still something new that nobody had seen in a big movie. And I think that's why people liked it too. And the height that we did it, not just buildings where you're kind of close to the ground and things like that. So I think that was also the exciting part of it, when they're in the crane and they're jumping and all that. So I think that's why it made it a little more special.
And I think I kind of want to drift us over to Skyfall, but I think before I do, there's an important question, and that is Quantum of Solace. Now, you weren't involved with the project. Mark Forster brought his own team in, from what I can tell. But, I mean, did you catch that film, and what did you think about it?
No, I mean, all the Bonds are great, and they're all entertaining, and they're fun, and the stunts are great. I didn't do it because I was asked to do it, and I had a meeting with Barbara and Foster.
Mark Forster?
Mark Forster.
Mm.
But unfortunately, I couldn't do it because I had already committed myself to Ridley to photograph his movie Body of Lies.
Oh, Body of Lies. Okay.
Body of Lies. So I had to do that, and which was a great movie for me too, as a director of photography, and that's why I couldn't do the Quantum. But it was well done. I mean, the stunts were well done, like in most of the Bonds, and I don't know. I think from all five, I think it's the number 5 in that sense. You know?
Sure.
Like you said,
Sure.
For me, still Casino is one of the best one, and it's number 1 in that sense.
Now, you come back into the fold with Skyfall in 2012, but there's a new director in town, Sam Mendes, who you'll have for 2 films at this point. Was the call to you in it originally? Obviously, they called you for Quantum. They've obviously called you back for Skyfall. But how was it working with Sam Mendes?
Well, I mean, Sam is not a director that comes from or came from action movies. So it was, in a way, we had more in the first one. Gary Powell and me, we came with big ideas, and Sam was always trying to make them a little smaller because he thought that for the story it didn't go well, so we had to bring down a lot of the stunts. And but otherwise, I mean, we had a good relation in both movies, and he was open for ideas.
Well, jumping off of your point there, for a second, just as a question, is there a particular scene that jumps to mind from Skyfall that you had sort of bigger visions for? Maybe you could sort of tell us about that.
Well, I think the train, we had bigger ideas in the sense that the stunts were a little bigger, and we had to bring them down. And the train, and I think it worked pretty good. But it's always like that. Sometimes it's a financial thing that we have to come down because you can't have so many helicopters, or you can't have. Or you don't have the time to do some of the stunts because of they're too big, it takes too long, and things like that. So, and I think, I mean, it happens in every movie in that sense, that start big and then the company starts cutting you down, and and what you want to do. And then when it comes out, you say, "Oh yeah, we should have done it that way." But you know,
I will say, like, the addition of the digger to the train sequence is mind-blowing. I remember being in theaters and just being absolutely blown away at how incredible that little bit of that train sequence is. I would just like to know about shooting that bit with the digger.
I really don't know who came up with the idea, if it was from the writers or Sam or Gary. I didn't. It could have been that it was from the beginning in the script. It was a challenge in a sense that to work with those machines, it's not easy, especially on a traveling train. And you had to, in a sense, you had to be very careful with how you moved, especially on a running train. Everybody had to be harnessed, and you couldn't just walk freely and things like that. So that makes it more difficult to shoot. And sometimes you don't get the angles that you really want. And but I mean, it's if we had more time, I think it could have been more exciting. But like I said, so the money talks sometimes.
Sure.
I mean, the question that jumps to my mind, it may be a repeating question for these Bond films, but you pointed out the parkour sequence in Casino Royale. The ones you shot in Skyfall, what was one you enjoyed the most?
I think both. I mean, they were different. And in Skyfall, you have a lot of cars, and in what is Casino. I mean, it wasn't so much the cars. I mean, we had cars. We had one of the biggest rollovers in film history, but it wasn't a chase like in Casino. I mean, in Skyfall. So in that sense, they were both different. And I mean, I enjoy action in general. I enjoy doing it, and whatever it is, it's I still enjoy it.
Well, I'll sort of bounce off of that with a follow up then. I mean, looking at, and you said this with Casino Royale, you know, your work was speaking for itself at that point, stuff like Gladiator and Black Hawk Down. What is it about the Bond films that kept you coming back for seconds, thirds, and fourths?
Well, I think it's not only the stunt, it was also the people we were working with, the producers, the directors. And I think especially the producers, Barbara and Michael, they're very supportive in everything you want to do. And they try to give you as much as they can. And yeah, sometimes, like I said, financially, you have to come down, but they're very supportive in everything. And they like to try and do, or also us as directors, try to do the stunts as real as possible. And use as little CG as possible, or more just to take lines off or out or things like that. So, but I think it's the team that is, it feels like a family. Like you're going back after a couple of years, you don't see your family, and you go back and you enjoy it. You have a good time. And I think that's something that I felt on Bond.
And I would love to know just a little bit about working with Roger Deakins on that one, and just, you know, what he was looking to accomplish with Skyfall.
Well, he had worked with Sam before, and he still does. So they had a very good idea of what they wanted. And for me, it was a great, I mean, I always admired his photography, and I still do. So for me, it was like a learning process. And like I said, with every DP, you learn things. And I learned a lot from him. I mean, they were more into the story than so much, especially also Roger, than into the action in that sense.
Now, I was looking at some behind the scenes footage of you shooting for Skyfall earlier today. It was the Shanghai sequence, I believe.
Uh-huh.
And it something jumped out to me. It was a question that popped into my head, because obviously the 4 films we've got to look at here. Of all the places you've been in the world to shoot a Bond film, what was your favorite location?
Well, there are a few. I mean, Bahamas, Jamaica, I mean, Istanbul was very interesting place as a city, as a locations. It's a very interesting city. I mean, it's tough to say one place. I mean, they're all great. They always use or look for great places to go. And sometimes second unit enjoys it more than first unit because they go for 2-3 days. Then they go back to the studio and we stay there for 3-4 weeks or as long as we need to. So I enjoy, and in general, I enjoy every location I go and the work I do. So it's tough to pinpoint one single location in that sense.
Is there a place you ever missed out on because you were doing second unit and first unit went there and you never got to go there? Like a place you were sort of jealous you didn't get to see?
Not really.
That's awesome.
I don't.
You've had it all. You've had it all.
No, I think we went everywhere first units went, or they came to where we were. One thing I missed in those days was when on Quantum is that they went to Chile, and I was born there, so I come from there, and I hadn't been there for a while, so it was I was looking forward to that, but I couldn't say no to Ridley Scott, so I missed that one out.
Was there a location that was the most challenging from a logistical standpoint?
I think Matera was challenging because you couldn't touch a lot of things, and you had to be careful. You had to that you don't destroy anything. Rome was one too, where we were in a few locations. The same thing. It's all these old buildings that you can't touch, and in Rome we lost a few locations because the city said no way. I mean, if a car goes and hits this building, which is 2,000 years old, no way. So it's mainly challenging in that sense, that you have to be careful that you don't destroy something that's old. Bahamas was challenging in a way that they didn't have all the equipment. We had to bring I mean, it was more challenging for production. We had to bring the cranes, the high cranes from London. Everything was coming from England. And I think production-wise, that's challenging for them. We just arrived there with the cameras and the cranes and everything we need. But in that sense, it's more for production, challenging part.
And now the team obviously came back together again for Spectre. Sam Mendes is back in the driving seat. Was there a different vibe on that set? Because I always find them to feel very different between Skyfall and Spectre. They seem to feel and look very different films, even though having the same sort of director. Did it feel different in that second film?
Well, you have a different DP, you have a different production designer, and they all want to put their signature on the film. So it's and I think that's what makes it different. And I think there were a lot of new people in Spectre, and on No Time, especially also on No Time to Die. I mean, a lot of people changed there. But between Skyfall and Spectre, the DP was different, and so he brings a new crew. The production designer brings in. So it's still a family, but a family that you don't know well. And until Casino Royale, it was probably pretty much the same people that the other films with Martin Campbell before. And
right. And I would like to know a little bit about the opening of the film. There's the big helicopter fight. And I had read that you were shooting the helicopter fight yourself, handheld. Is that correct, inside?
Well, we did. I was helping First Unit on that in Mexico City. We did all the plates for it, and then the fight inside. I said, "Why don't we do that here instead of doing it green screen?" And it was like nobody said, "Oh, I'll go on it." And I said, I'll give me a camera and I'll do it, and let's go up there. So that's how it all came up to happen. And I mean, I've done many jobs where operators, because they can refuse to do a shot that I want, and so I put myself in it and do it, you know, and that's what happened also in Spectre.
Was there ever a moment where you sort of wish someone had put their hand up first when you were up in the helicopter?
It's not that. I think sometimes you feel that it's a shot that they need, and can be more exciting to do it for real than to go to a green screen where you have to try and match the light, and you don't have the background. And Mexico had everything there, and even the best plates and all that, you're still gonna look like it's a little fake. So and that's, I've done it many times, that I put myself sometimes without production knowing it, because they would say no way. So it's if something happened, they can stop. They have to stop the filming for a few days until somebody comes or somebody else takes over. And so in that sense, the productions are very careful with. So most of the time, I don't tell them.
And one of the things about Spectre is, like, visually, it's a very unique approach to James Bond. It's one that's often quite polarizing, I should say, when you talk to Bond fans. I would just like to know, working with Hoyt van Hoytema on the visual look of the film, kind of what he wanted to achieve with that film.
Well, I don't get really involved that much in that sense, because that's something that he does with the director. And then I just get the sense what they want to do or how they want to do it and the look of it. So I'm not part of that completely, and that's in those discussions when they start before I do. Even if I start 2 months before or 3 months, he starts a lot earlier, so they have a better idea, and they talk about what they want to achieve with the photography and all that. So. And I mean, we used IMAX that we haven't used in other Bonds. He had experience with IMAX before, and it was my first time that I shoot with IMAX. It's a camera that it's not easy to do handheld. Even Hoytman is he's a expert in IMAX and doing handheld. I mean, incredible as an operator with that. So I mean, for me, IMAX is I don't think it brings much to the story. It's a part of opening and closing the screen, but they thought that it would bring something to the movie. That's something that, like I said, he would talk to Mendes about it.
Mm-hmm. Was it a steep learning curve jumping to IMAX, or was it fairly easy for you?
No, it was the sense and the photography. It's very easy. What is a learning process is how to rig the camera, how to. I mean, it's a heavy camera. It's a big camera, and it's not like just put a 2C or a small digital camera on it. So you really have to prepare very well before you do anything with it, and have all the mounts. There are different mounts, and the cars have to be rigged different, and so that's the learning process in that sense.
And I suppose, just keeping with the trend, obviously we pointed out the helicopter sequence at the start in Mexico, but was there any other sequences you really enjoyed doing with Spectre? Something that jumped out to you?
Well, we did the boat scene. That was fun, and yeah, I should see all these films again.
I mean, they're pretty good. They're worth watching.
Matera was also nice, and the chase we did on the streets, and the motorcycle there.
Well, you're leading me in beautifully to my sort of next section, which is No Time to Die. Obviously, new director again, Cary Fukunaga. What was that like working with him?
I think he was very open to a lot of the suggestions we had. It's the same. He doesn't come from really action movies. He did actually a very good movie in Africa, which was called
Beasts of No Nation.
Beast of No Nation. I think he did a great job on that, where he did the photography and directed, and I think he did most of it himself. He was very open to it, to the what we came up with ideas with Lee. Lee was the stunt coordinator, Lee Morrison. So he was very open to that, which sometimes it's great for us because we can do things that we vision a little more and how to do it, and yeah, and also with the director of photography, the Linus
Linus Sangren.
Linus
Sangren.
I mean, we had he was very open. He was very I had a good relation with him too, and I actually, in most of them, I had a good relation with the DOPs and the directors, because I understand very quick the way they want to light it, and they don't have to be looking over my shoulder and things like that. So, and of course, that comes with experience, especially working with different DPs, you know, and understand the way they want to light, the way the use of lenses they want, and same with the directors. Some directors, I mean, I did a movie with Tony Scott, and he likes long lenses, so there were shots that I would have done wider, but he said no, go tighter, or go tighter and further away, and things like that. So it's a different. That's how you learn what every director and DP wants on the film.
And I would love to know, with No Time to Die, you know, you've worked with Gary Powell on several Bond films, and you have Lee Morrison taking over as the stunt coordinator.
Well, I've worked with Lee many times before because he worked with Gary a lot. He was his right hand or right arm. So I knew him very well, and he learned a lot from Gary in that sense. And so we had a good relation from before No Time to Die. And I think it's important, especially me doing photography and being the director, is to have a good relation with the stunt coordinators, because otherwise they can bury you in that sense, but in a good way. To have a good relation with all the stunt guys in that, and especially with Lee, with ideas to come up with ideas and see how the best way to execute them. That's important, because if you can have stunt guys that they're a little, and they say, no, this is the way I want to do it, and you can't change anything. And even if you might have a better idea, they're very they're not open to suggestions for somebody that's not a stunt guy. And with all this, I mean, the stunt guys, I've worked with so many that, and I've learned also from them doing stunts, that, I mean, if somebody asked me to be a stunt coordinator, I probably would do not a great job, but a good job.
Ever thought about trying it?
No.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Fair enough. Yeah.
I've done what I've done with Lee and with Gary and all that, and when they rehearse, sometimes I go and rehearse with them on motorcycles, and or I'm part of the stunt team in a way, and I've done stunts with them, and I've done jumps on airbags and things like that. I mean, I like doing it, and I like to also see what it feels and be part of it. It might give me a better idea to understand the stunts when they talk to me.
Now, yeah, we've sort of chronicled your 4 Bond films individually. Maybe just looking back on the whole system of all 4 of them together. Now, you mentioned off the top you were going to see Bond films back in 1964 and 62. Now, you saw it through all the way to No Time to Die, where the character is killed at the end. What were your thoughts on sort of that big choice at the end?
Well, I don't know if we killed him.
Well, it remains to be seen. If you go to the end of the credits, apparently he's returning, so who knows?
No, I mean, the thing is that the character is still there. The 007 will stay there and it will have the same name, James Bond, and what's changing is the actor. It's as far as I know, 007 is something that an agent gets. It's they like on the last one they called her, I'm a 007, but no, I think it's good to bring somebody new. I mean, it'd still be 007 and James Bond, and you get used to the new one, and he's going to do 3, 4, or who knows how many. But I think it's the character the actor brings a lot to the character, to the movie. So hopefully the new one will be somebody can get into his shoes. But I think it's mainly the character, the 007.
Well, and we spoke about Daniel Craig and sort of watching him grow throughout the films, but of all of the people you've worked with on the Bond films, say maybe apart from Daniel Craig, who was the person you most enjoyed working with?
Well, because the main actor that I had to work with was always Daniel. I mean, sometimes we got other actors, but it was like for a day, and it was either for something that they didn't shoot or they had to shoot, so we had to go in and shoot it. But the main relation was mainly with Daniel to come to work with us. And like I said, also he felt very comfortable coming to second unit, and he knew that we would take care of him. And the 2 moments that he had that he twisted his ankle was with first unit, so it wasn't really with us. And I think a lot of actors enjoy coming to second unit, like I said, because they feel a little, there's not that pressure that they have with the dialogue with all the other actors and things like that. So they enjoy that. It's like playtime.
I mean, there's been a lot of impressive stunt performances over the films that you've looked after. I mean, Ana de Armas in No Time to Die with that sort of fight sequence was fantastic, I have to say. She was great. And just sort of looking again at the process of making these films, is there anything you've personally learned about filmmaking from doing these films? Because obviously you're looking at your filmography, you've done all kinds of things in between: Terminator, Avengers, Jungle Cruise, Bird Box. You've been a very busy man in between these films, but what has doing the Bond films taught you about filmmaking?
Well, one thing that I liked about Bond is always that we try to do the stunts for real as much as we can. Avengers, on the other hand, is a lot of CG. Everything is CG, so it's a totally different kind of filmmaking, and that's what I liked about Bond. That and some of the other movies that I've done is the reality and doing the movie and doing the stunts and all that, and I think they look better too. Yeah, you're always going to have a little help from CG, but that's what really excited me the most when they called me back for a Bond.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
Attention, SpyHards, diehards. Independent podcasting, much like the spy game, requires considerable resources, whether it's research, equipment, hosting, or of course constructing a hidden moon base. We're putting out the call for your support.
That's right, the SpyHards Patreon is the home to our ever-growing lineup of Agents in the Field episodes where we decode non-spy films from your favorite spy actors, and The Debrief, where we activate our billion-dollar brains and predict how the spy movie news of today will shape tomorrow.
Cam, what have we got in our crosshairs this month?
Zootalore! Inspector Clouseau is back because we are tackling the second Pink Panther comedy, 1964's A Shot in the Dark. Let's hit the nudist colony.
So accept your mission and hop in the Helmmobile today at patreon.com/SpyHards. But before Spectre agents intercept this broadcast, let's get back to the Spy Jinx.
And I mean, speaking of reality, maybe we'll jump off of Bond and just talk briefly, maybe a bit about the Bourne Identity from 2002, which, you know, when you're working on that film, I just love to know about shooting on that film, you know, maybe sequences you worked on, but just also about, I mean, that movie really changed the language of spy cinema, and they would continue to develop that with the Bourne sequels, but just shooting the Bourne Identity, you know, sequences you worked on, and just kind of reimagining spy action.
Well, all the chase scenes are, it's all second unit. We had to change the chase because at the beginning in the script there was the chase was in a train in Paris, and somehow at the end we couldn't shoot, or we had too little time. So Doug Lyman said, "Look, we got to change the whole scene. So how do we do this?" So we came up with the idea, okay, why don't we start saying change again, and we do a whole chase scene and all that. And that's great too, when a director asks you to come up with ideas, and you start working with the stunt director and the stunt coordinator, and you go around town and you see, okay, how do we do it? What can we do? And that's for me, it's exciting too, because you are a lot more involved in the chase or in the scene itself. And yeah, it changed a little bit because also later the action movies, they started being cut a little quicker. They were more realistic, and they like the older Bonds. I mean, everything was very slow. Even the stunts, when they happen, you know, you let them happen, and it's slow. And when you look at the new films, the action is a lot quicker, and the music is different. It's more exciting and all that. So I think that changed the way we started making action.
I mean, it definitely influenced the Bond films I think you went to work on afterwards. I think the Bourne films really did sort of pave the way for what Bond did from that point onwards.
Yeah.
But just on the Bourne sort of side of things, was it the chase sequences specifically you worked on? Was there any other scenes in the film you helped out with?
No, we did. Again, I think I should sit down a whole week and look at all the films that I've done.
There's a lot. There's a lot. Well, I hope at all. Do you recall if you did the scene with the sort of hand-to-hand combat between Matt Damon and Nicky Norday?
I was there. We set it all up. They did a little bit with the actors, and then we finished it with the stunts. But we set it up for Doug.
We had Nicky on the show last year, and we sort of went through that whole scene bit by bit, and he had a lot of fun doing it, especially diving out of the window onto the bag outside.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times the first unit starts or comes after us, and or we set it all up and they come and do as much as they can, and then we finish it or start. And that happens a lot.
And one thing I think is really interesting is that, you know, you have Bourne Identity is released 2002. The same year, XXX comes out, the first film with Vin Diesel, and you worked on both of them. And one thing I think is interesting about XXX is that in many ways, it's more of the classic Bond kind of action, but at the same time, enhanced to a degree that is kind of going beyond what Bond had done. I would just like to know, in terms of staging the action for XXX, how you kind of achieve that sort of Bondian feel while also going bigger.
Well, we always try and get bigger.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end also, I think it has to do with the editing, because On second unit, I mean, I tried to give them as many options as possible that they can cut, and the editor can look and see how can he make it more exciting. So, I mean, I have an idea how I see the action, but if they give you the same film to you, you probably cut it completely different. And if you don't have choices, then you might. And I think that happened on with Ben Affleck, the film we did in Boston,
The Town.
The Town, right? I knew the footage was there. When I saw the cut, I talked to the producer. I said, we got to find somebody who cuts action, because this is not the way it's the cut should look. And that's what they did. And they brought, I can't remember who, they brought a different editor who knew to cut action, and he did. I mean, it was like day and night after he cut it, because the footage was there. But if you don't cut action and you're more into drama, into more speaking, then it's difficult to do it right, I think.
When you shoot an action sequence, and I'm not looking to point fingers at anyone, but like sometimes the editing is going to come out in a way where your work looks fantastic, and sometimes it doesn't. You know, it maybe leaves you underwhelmed. Are you able to watch the finished product and walk away still content with the experience and working on the film when you're not necessarily happy with the edit?
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, I when I see a film that or the action that I've worked on, I know the footage. And sometimes I say, yeah, they should have used this shot instead of what the editor used. And like I had when we did the Gladiator, and I mean the movies I did with Ridley Scott and Pietro was the editor. He used to sometimes say, Alexander, come in, let me know, because a lot of times editors don't see 100% all the footage. Say, oh, I'll do this, and then, yeah, okay, fine. And with Pietro, I used to go into the editing room, we sit down and say, look, there's this shot. What shot? Okay, let's look for it. Oh yeah, you're right, let's put that one in instead of this one in. So it depends on the connection with the editor too. And on Casino, I had that also with the editor, and some editors say, no, thank you, you did your job, I do mine now.
I think as I'm sort of starting to wrap us up, I did just want to ask a couple of quick things about some other jobs that you've worked on. And one that jumped to mind is, because I was looking through your credits, and I noticed that you did the commercials for Land Rover for No Time to Die as the director of these the advertisements. You said you worked in sort of advertisements before as well, which led me to find out that you directed actually one of my favorite films, personally speaking, which is Resident Evil Apocalypse.
Right.
I had no idea you were connected with that at all. And so what was that like? And how was that to be the director as well?
Well, I mean, it's been a few years now that I want to direct. Unfortunately, I don't get the break to do it. There were 3 directors involved in that, and at the end, I was the one chosen for it. And for me, it was a great experience because I had done commercials and I've done documentaries and like that as a director. So it was a great experience. I was a little bit afraid in those days because of the actors.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a very good relation with Mila. One of the problems that we had was that she was breaking up with, she's married with him now.
Paul W.S. Anderson?
Oh, with Paul. And he was in Czechoslovakia doing Predator versus
versus Alien, yeah.
and they were breaking up, and so she wanted to do something, and he was sending script changes, and she was didn't like them, and so I was kind of sometimes in the middle of it, and that didn't do very well for the relation that I was having with Mila work-wise. So unfortunately, I had to change the DP on that because I was doing most of the work myself, or telling him what I was doing, and not taking care of the actors. But no, I mean, I always wanted to direct, and last year I did 3 movies for Amazon, and so, but it's a tough changeover.
Well, it's certainly a big leap, and I mean, the film itself sticks out to me because I'm a big follower of the video games, and I think this is probably the truest adaptation of any of the films that they've ever done compared to the video game. So I credit you for that, for walking that line between making an entertaining film and sort of staying faithful to what was in the video games that you're taking from. But I mean, was that an effort that you made to sort of keep some of the things in but change it up as well?
Well, there was something that they told me that I had to keep a few or try to make it look more to the game, and have it come out in the game. So that was something that they told me to do, and it's not something that I said, "Oh, I want to do it that way." And the producers had also their ideas, and Mila had their ideas. So at the end, we're all into one bucket, and we tried to do the best we could there. And so that's how. But and all in all, it was a great experience for me.
And I feel like we would be remiss to not just briefly touch on The Hunt for Red October, which you were director of photography for the second unit. And I would just like to know about, I mean, that is a fantastic movie, but just working with John McTiernan on that movie.
Well, Jan had worked with him before, and I worked a couple of days on Die Hard.
Oh, nice, yeah.
Met him. And with Jan, I had a long relation. I think I did 9 films in total with him. So they were both very happy letting me do what I had to do. And sometimes the Bo, who was the director of the second unit director, Bo Marks, I think it was Bo Marks. I mean, he wasn't there all the time because he was also a producer on the movie, or line producer, something like that. And that also gave me a lot of confidence to do both jobs, to direct and be in charge of it when he had to take care of first unit. So for me, it was also in that sense a great experience that to take that responsibility as a director and a DP.
Well, the last couple of questions we have for you, Alexander, and then we'll let you get on with your lovely afternoon. The first one is there a film or a sequence in the film that you are most proud of your work?
Well, I think there are many. I mean, each film has something that I'm proud of it. I think Black Hawk Down, because I had a lot of work to do there. I'm very proud of what we did. I mean, in general, the Bond films too. Really, I can't pinpoint one. I mean, I get involved so much into it that I enjoy the work, that even if it's a small scene, I feel proud of it. And I know sometimes it doesn't come out the way I want it or the way the director wants it. But in general, I think I'm proud of what I've done.
What are you currently working on?
Well, I'm doing a pilot as a DP, and I start on it's a Marvel movie in May in Atlanta. We're starting shooting in July, but I start in May, and finish this, and then I have my own project. It's called The Archer,
Mm-hmm.
and looking for an actor, and hopefully when I finish with and that one is to direct first unit, looking for an actor, and hopefully we'll when I finish in September we can start with that.
You've teased us with the Marvel film now. I kind of need to figure out what it is. It's
Is it Thunderbolts?
Thunderbolts. Yeah.
Boom. There we go.
Hey, look at that. Look at that encyclopedic knowledge there. Very
Thank you.
good. All right, final question for you. And this question has been asked to every single guest we've ever had on the show. Alexander Witt, what is your favorite spy movie of all time?
I mean, I think in Bond, in that sense, it's been my.
Sure.
I mean, because I grew up with it. Even Body of Lies, I think it's a good spy movie, and I
Sure.
most people either they didn't pay attention to the dialogue, but I think it's a pretty good movie in that sense. You know, it's
Well, I'll hold you to it. You said Bond, but can you pick a Bond film that you reach for the most often?
what is it called? I mean, Doctor No,
Right.
and the other one was Goldfinger. Maybe because I was still a young boy, and you get out of the film and you think I want to be James Bond, and that stays in your mind for the rest of your life because you grew up. I grew up with it.
It's a great choice. There's a reason why Goldfinger is the blueprint for Bond films. They still go back to it every time I look at it. So there you go. Well, Alexander, it's been an absolute treat picking apart the Bond work and all your spy work and your other work this evening. Thank you for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. And well, maybe soon we'll have another one.
Definitely.
Well, hopefully they give you a call because you've done wonderful work with the last ones you've worked on.
Yeah, I don't know if when they do the next Bond I mean, a lot of times it depends on the director. Because Barbara and Michael, they can just mention my name, but they can't force anybody to say, no, you got to use Alexander. So hopefully the next director has an open mind, and we'll see.
But you're saying you'd go back for another one.
Oh, I would go. Oh, yeah, definitely.
Well, there you go. That's the first credit on the call sheet there. We've got Alexander Witt signed on as second unit director there. Perfect. So that's Bond 26 sorted. Alexander, thank you again for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, both of you.
Well, there you go, folks. That was our chat with Mr. Alexander Witt. As always, we'd like to thank Alexander for taking the time to speak with us. Cam, what did you think?
This was a really informative interview because one thing about James Bond is we talk a lot about the actors. We've talked to people who've written James Bond films. But what most people talk about, or a lot of people talk about when they talk about James Bond, is action. And so it was really fantastic to have on, Alexander, who shot a lot of the iconic action sequences that have made the Daniel Craig era much of what it is, whether it's the parkour sequence, the helicopter stuff at the start of Spectre. Like, he has a long laundry list of contributions to this rebooted Bond franchise. And I mean, boy, audiences have definitely gone nuts for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, the thing that excited me most about coming into this interview was actually just getting to grips with what a second unit director did. And that's not through me being an idiot. It's just, it's not a person that gets celebrated that much when it comes to talking about films. You watch all the sort of press tours and it's the screenwriter maybe, or the director at least anyway. It's never second unit. It's never the stunts team or anyone like that who really are the sort of scaffolding that hold these films up, the putty that brings them together. And it's great to hear from a man who has really woven a thread throughout Daniel Craig's tenure as James Bond, sans of course Quantum of Solace, which we discussed, and I got something wrong with that. He kindly corrected me. Yes, from that point of view, I think it was a really insightful discussion too. I really enjoyed it. I think something I want to highlight first is just sort of the interesting way he got connected with it, and like he had to interview, which we didn't dive into too much, but I find the concept of someone interviewing for a film really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, every process is different, right? Because sometimes it's a case when we talk to Dan Mindell, for example, about some of the major projects he'd worked on as director of photography, it was like a text message. Hey,
Yeah.
want to go to a, galaxy far, far away? Yes. And so it's interesting because you just never know. It depends entirely on, the producers and what they're looking for. But it was interesting that not only did he interview, but just talked about kind of that family dynamic of the Broccoli unit that we hear so much about, like the way that Eon runs their productions and how much of a difference that makes. It's a sort of thing that, like, you hear it thrown out so much, you're kind of like, well, I mean, is that really the case? But it really does seem like a big draw for bringing people into the fold, but also keeping them there once they've, shot their first film.
Well, yeah, that was going to be my reply. Apart from the fact that these are prestigious films to work on for anyone, really, these are films that people seek out to work on. They also are providing an atmosphere people want to come back, and I think that's very important. And he being Alexander, spoke about just being able to get in contact with the producers, Barb and Michael, and sort of get what they need. And that is crucial. And I think it's really important that he was able to come to these films, and also with different directors almost every single time, and different teams around him as well, and be able to bring his sort of voice to the proceedings without being sort of washed out and closed out.
Mm-hmm. And there was like a real calmness to Alexander that I suspect would be key in a lot of his success. When you look at a lot of these action sequences, whether it is the very complex parkour sequence, shooting the train and the digger stuff in Skyfall, I don't know about you, Scott. I would probably be a mess if I was dealing with the logistics of having to shoot a lot of these incredibly complex action sequences. He seems, very cool, calm, and collected, and I can totally believe that he's kind of the guy you would want, and makes a lot of sense why he's doing, some of the Marvel films, like a lot of the major productions going on, and why he's kind of a go-to guy for Ridley Scott as well.
Well, I imagine someone in this position it could be a hard job from what I've learned from this discussion. You are working for someone else. You are not the head person on the poster. You're not directed by blank. You're working to their vision. And so you need people in that role that are trustworthy, that are good at communication, and can also good at sort of listening and interpreting and putting that onto the screen. And it's proven in the man's filmography. Like doing camera work for The Hunt for Red October, going all the way back there. He was trusted from that point onwards, and he ends up working as second unit director before he gets to Bond on films like Gladiator.
Yeah, that little film.
Like that's that little film, and it's nice. And I'll also make a side note. Alexander really does sort of weave through our SpyMaster interviews through the years, going back to David Franzoni, who wrote Gladiator, we had on the show. He worked with Sebastian Foucan and Joseph Milson, I imagine, as well on the set of The Chase. He worked with Gary Powell, Nicky Norday as well on the Bourne Identity. So it's actually nice to have someone who sort of worked with all of our previous guests.
And also, in some ways, Rich Wilkes, who wrote Triple X, and then he was obviously shooting the second unit action sequences for Triple X.
Absolutely. And I think it's testament to his work in film that he is still working in these big blockbuster landscape films. Like he's just going to start work on Thunderbolts in a few months' time. That's a big MCU film. I'm sure it's going to do very well, just like the rest of them do. But he worked on Avengers Infinity War, which I think to many people is the best of the MCU. Certainly up there in my top 5, let alone working on all these Bond films. And it's been really enlightening for me to see what it takes to be successful in that domain, to have and foster these relationships, not only the sort of Bond relationship that they have, but relationships with the people around you. He spoke a lot about working with Gary Powell and the stunt team, and I think, again, that's very important.
One of the other things he really explained that I think is very not only interesting but helpful for probably a lot of listeners was when you're shooting second unit and your DPs are people like Roger Deakins, Hoyt van Hoytema, go down the line of all the people he's worked with. These are all very distinct cinematographers who have very unique styles, and the way the second unit director matches the style of each individual film so that there is visual continuity. That was the sort of thing, like, I'd always had a sense of how it probably worked, but it was great to have him actually explain it.
Yeah, because you have to match it and not just sort of emulate, but you have to make it feel like it was their work in a way, which is actually quite thankless when you think about it, because you won't be able to put your stamp on it as much, really. And as Alexander spoke about, he would suggest ideas, but a lot of the time he's just working to the brief of the director or the DP. And so I think credit goes to him for being able to do it so successfully.
And also, when you look at the Bond films, for example, and you've got these big, iconic action sequences, typically the responsibility for those is assigned to the main director from the point of view of the audience. The audience walks out going, boy, Sam Mendes hit a home run with that action sequence. And not necessarily the case.
No. Again, also with the parkour chase, you think, Martin Campbell, you've done it again, but did he do it?
Well, it's like, obviously, in designing the sequence, storyboarding, elements like that, 100%. But when it comes to, actually executing it, shooting it, not necessarily, always the case.
Absolutely. And maybe just sort of looking more holistically at his Bond experience, it's just nice to see someone who had such a great experience with him and wants to go back for more.
Yeah, it reminded me a little bit as well of when we interviewed John Glenn, who started out as a second unit director and worked with Bond for a long time. And that guy also, he was a great interview. You'd go back to the archives for that one, but he worked on several and then continued on and eventually directed a bunch. But it seems like once people start directing Bond movies, there's a certain lure, and I'm sure it's not just, as we said, like working with Eon, who are known to have this family environment, just kind of the excitement, the locations all over the world. As he cited in the interview, the preference for practical effects versus CG, which is probably a lot more interesting just from the point of view of being, a filmmaker. So you can definitely see the appeal of Bond, and I think it goes beyond just Bond is cool.
And to sort of close this off, I just think it's also important to note that there aren't that many people that have walked the line between Bond, Bourne, Triple X, and Jack Ryan.
Yeah, no kidding.
I mean, we're going to tackle the Jack Ryans at some point. We've done the Bournes, we've done the Triple X's, we're about halfway through the Bonds now. He might be the only person that really connects all those things together, let alone his other spy credits.
Yeah, I know. I mean, even X-Men First Class, which he also worked on, has pretty high spy cred as well.
Yeah, that one's sort of been in contention for a little bit, hasn't it? We're wondering about that one.
Yeah.
So we hope you enjoyed that chat with Alexander. I'm really enjoying this sort of film school vibe we're getting going with a lot of these filmmakers that are deciding to come on the show and share their knowledge. Roberta Schaefer, the DP from Quantum of Solace, is another good example. Dan Mendel, the DP from Spy Game and many, many other films. Another great example. Well, over to you, Cam. What have we got coming up later this week?
Well, on Friday, we are going to release our interview with Bridget Miller, who played Dr. Vogel in both Spectre and No Time to Die. That's right, Blofeld's right-hand woman is going to be on the show. And then next week, on Tuesday, we are going to release our episode on 1973's Enter the Dragon. That's right, the iconic Bruce Lee classic. We're going to give our take. Look forward to that.
Absolutely wonderful stuff. Stick around for that interview Friday, and of course next week with Enter the Dragon. Very exciting times here on SpyHards. And if you like what you heard on the show, please consider leaving us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts, and do not forget to follow us discreetly, of course, on social media at SpyHards. That's SpyHards on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. But when you're re-verifying your range to target, remember, send only one ping.